but they,
I just sniffle all the time.
okay.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and let's get started there. I know most of you know who we are, but for reporting purposes, I'm Dr. Travis. I'm down here in the Lakewood office, and then Dr. Phillips is up there in the McKinney office, and Dr. Stevens normally joins us, but he's busy doing an exam right now, trying to help as many people as possible. But welcome to our 12 minutes of health this week. And so our goal is to educate you guys to the best of our ability, going through research and what the good research says. And so you guys know what the facts are and how to use those to be healthier. Because it's all about eat well, move well, think well, especially when we're in, crisis, pandemic, so to speak. But the more we can eat, move, and think as best as possible, the healthier you're going to be. And that's what we know right now. And so today we're going to talk about probiotics and how they help us stay healthy. And so, Dr. Phillips, you want to take over and go through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Dr. Travis was saying, it is a very important time right now to eat well, move well, think well, and take care of yourself. Try to maintain a state of homeostasis or baseline health and immunity. It may be, I hate to say it's more important than ever because it's always important to be healthy. But I think we have more of an audience than ever when we start talking about health. So we'll jump into probiotics today. I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and we're going to talk about it. Now, this study that I'm using is a study that I really like, but there's some things that I don't like about it as well. And I'll get to those at the end so that you have a little better understanding of where we're coming from and why we're constantly talking about eating well to reach sufficiency for your immune system. So let me share this here with you guys. Okay, cool. So yeah, like we said, we're talking about probiotics today. So probiotics are the good bacteria that are found in your body, okay? We have actually 10 times more bacterial cells in our body than we do the rest of our cells put together. So it's a big thing. It's hugely important. There's a large part of the scientific population that thinks because we evolved with bacteria the way we did, that we are just houses for bacteria and we're helping them along in their evolution. So the truth of it is when you look at all the research, we work symbiotically. We're beneficial to them and they're beneficial to us. So as always, we try to bring you the best research we can. So it's not just like our opinions, but we're giving you facts and things that have been studied for a long time now. We look at probiotics, they've kind of just made this surge here lately. In the last 5 years, there's been about 1,000 studies done on probiotics. In the 25 years before that, there was only like 85 total studies done in that 25 years. So what we found out in looking at this study was done by Reed et al. It's the potential uses of probiotics in clinical practice. So they're just looking at different symptoms really that they started using probiotics with against the placebo and against medicines, and they were seeing benefits to these certain things. But in the beginning, it talks about what probiotics actually do in our body. So probiotics are essential for us in the synthesis of vitamin K2, the synthesis of vitamin B12, the synthesis of folic acid, of short chain fatty acids, which make up our cell membranes. Like all this stuff is getting synthesized because of how the good bacteria in our body digests proteins and also digests fiber. Okay, it creates like this fermentation process where we get these byproducts, and these byproducts happen to be vitamins that most of us are told, everybody I know is like, well, I'm over 50, I have to take B12 and folic acid and a B complex. That's not necessarily true if you have the right amount, if you're sufficient in probiotic bacteria. So your body will actually create that. And it doesn't matter the age, it matters the sufficiency of bacteria in your gut at the time. So one of the biggest things that it does through this whole process is it prevents inflammation in our body. And inflammation is really the root cause of all disease right now that we have. So in this study, they went in and they looked at what diseases is this having a positive effect on, right? And the first one they noticed was necrotizing enterocolitis, which sounds really bad, but it's a disease mostly in infants when they're born. And about 90% of the infants that develop this are infants that were C-section babies. And the problem is they didn't come down the birthing canal and acquire all that bacteria that they need. So they get this really inflamed gut, and they have a ton of digestive issues and bowel movement issues and things like that. But what they notice is when they started giving them the good bacteria that they're supposed to get, that these things started going away. So that bacteria becomes hugely important for babies. They notice that it has a positive effect on diarrhea. So and the way that it does that is it helps heal the gut, right? That's just an inflammation problem that we have. Most of the time you think of it if you know, food poisoning or you ate something bad or things like that. But the real root cause of it is that you didn't have the bacteria to properly break things down and your stomach got super inflamed. The diarrhea study was kind of tough though, because usually when someone contracts diarrhea, they look at it and it lasts for, the average was 56 hours, 52 or 56 hours. The problem when they start treating it with a probiotic is they don't treat it, much like medicine in the United States, which we'll talk about here in a couple of minutes, but they don't treat it until it pops up. There's no preventative measure for it. So once it pops up, it takes about 12 hours for the bacteria to even get in there and start to have an effect. But even with that being the case, they were still able to knock it down to 28 hours on average. So they cut it in half, which is pretty big, especially if you've ever suffered with that and had to go through all of it, right? The next disease that they noticed and studied was bacterial gastroenteritis. This is much like what the baby would go through, but it happens as we're adults. And the problem with this one is it's caused by a bacteria, a bad bacteria, and it inflames the gut. The bacteria gets through the holes that are in our gut when it's not working the way it should. That get through our stomach lining, which is only one cell thick. But the problem is it gets through there because we don't have enough good bacteria in there. And when we don't have enough good bacteria, there's plenty of food for bad bacteria because there's no competition there. There's plenty of holes through the gut and binding sites that they can work their way through because that's normally where the good bacteria bind in a healthy gut. So if we're lacking that, we notice that we get more bacterial and viral infections. So when you treat this with a probiotic, again, it's too late. We could have prevented it, but over time, you actually can get the better results than they get with placebo or different medications as well in this study. So that's really encouraging. Inflammatory diseases and bowel syndromes. Everybody that I've ever had as a patient, even before I really understood probiotics, I had a basic understanding of it. Everybody with inflammatory bowel or Crohn's or any of those inflammatory diseases, I would put on a probiotic and we would always see good results. So it's important in those situations, and that's just because of the inflammation and how it protects, which I'll get to in just a second as well. They noticed success in treating cancer. Now, this wasn't in the human subject. This was in what they call in vitro, or in a dish. They took cancer cells, and the cancer cells feeding off of what the normal medium that you would find in an animal cell or in a human cell. And then they added probiotic bacteria. And what they saw was there was a huge increase in glutathione. And glutathione is a powerful antioxidant. So what that caused was it stopped cancer cells from proliferating. So they couldn't go through their normal toxic proliferation that they go through because of the increase in glutathione due to the bacteria eating the food, causing that fermentation that I was talking about, and it happened to be one of the byproducts. So when they were looking at cancers, they saw a great decrease in the cancer cells and the stopping of the proliferation, which was big. Allergies are a big one. And this, again, is due to inflammation. Everything we do that has to do with allergies involves our immune system, right? Over 70% of our immune system is in our gut. And if our gut's unhealthy and inflamed, then our immune system's not going to function correctly, whether it's allergies, bacterias, viruses, whatever it is. So by reducing that inflammation, they were noticing a positive effect on allergies, which could be good with those cats, Nettie, that we were talking about earlier. So something to consider. Women's reproductive and bladder health. This, again, it's just another inflammation issue. A lot of women who had uterine fibroids and problems with ectopic pregnancies, they would notice that when the decrease in inflammation, they were much better off. And then surgical infections, when good bacteria is present, again, it fights off the bad bacteria. And just real quick, not to go too long, but the thing that I like about this study is it shows probiotics are working for all these different disorders and diseases, right? And it's helpful to have. And with more and more studies against placebos and things like that, we may actually use them as a kind of an intervention for things like this. But what I don't like about this study is if we had the bacteria in the beginning, a lot of these symptoms don't ever come around. Okay, because what good bacteria does is it gets in and it attaches to the cell wall of our stomach, okay, the mucosa of our stomach and our gut. And when it does that, it tightens up the bonds, it creates the fatty acids to create the cell tightness to where we no longer have leaky gut, to where nothing gets through there that's not supposed to. When we don't have good bacteria, viruses sneak through, large proteins, bacteria, all kinds of stuff gets through there. When we do have enough good bacteria in there, that good bacteria is eating the food that the bad bacteria eats, right? And so now that bacteria is dying off, those viruses are dying off. The virus is looking to bind to certain sites and it can't because the good bacteria is in the way and it's already there. So there's no binding sites and it dies off. And there's another study, not this one, but it was one done by Bengmark that I talked about the other day. And it said, if we have sufficient good bacteria in our gut, bacteria, viruses, funguses, and yeast cannot survive from the studies that they've done. So it is huge for our immune system and preventative health to be sufficient in it. Now, probiotic bacteria does rely on vitamin D as well as omega-3 fatty acids being present to function at its highest level. And that's why every single patient that comes to us ends up taking an omega-3 fatty acid with vitamin A and D and our probiotic, because they work symbiotically to help protect us and boost our immune system and help us reach that baseline health and immunity. So the probiotic is a big one. It's being studied more and more every day. I've been taking it before I even realized exactly what it was doing for me. I know we'll probably have some questions on what's a good probiotic, what's a bad one, how do we know? I eat a lot of yogurt. I hear that all the time. It's just not enough. But this is kind of what this study went through, and it's good in the fact that we can fight these things, but it's also, if we could be more preventative about our health, and this is across the board, our healthcare is set up to just treat symptoms. Well, what if we didn't have to get those symptoms? What if we could take care of ourselves and in dire need take care of those symptoms, but be more preventative? That's how our offices are set up. That's where Eat Well, Move Well, Think Well comes from. We want to help people. We understand there's crisis states out there, but we want people to live a healthier life in the end. And that's why we do these 12 minutes to health. So Dr. Travis, anything to add there, or anybody have any questions?
One thing to add on there, so that you were talking about, just because patients of mine always, like, well, I have, gastroenteritis or this, but remember guys, if anything ends in itis, that just means inflammation. We got to figure out what's causing the inflammation to find the root of the problem. So a lot of times I give generic diagnosis with itis at the end, but it's just inflammation. So we just got to help fight that inflammation. And then Eric had the question, what are your thoughts on organic apple cider vinegar? I've been taking it each morning for some time and has caused my acid reflux to subside.
That it has caused it to subside? Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's great. And there's a lot of good bacteria in there. The good thing about when you get a bacteria from a fruit or a plant source, you're going to get a lot of Lactobacillus plantarum, which is the most important so far that we've studied in all the research. It's the most important strain of bacteria, and it should be the highest strain of bacteria in a probiotic that you're taking. The good thing about it is it attaches to your gut wall. It's one that attaches to your gut wall. Whereas I get a lot of patients who are hesitant to take a probiotic because they eat a ton of yogurt, they tell me. Well, a dairy sourced bacteria, it serves a purpose. We need some, but not as much as we need that attaches to our gut wall. The dairy source does not. It flows straight through. And it has some purposes, but it's not nearly as important as those attaching to the gut wall to heal the gut wall. So I also use apple cider vinegar on everything. I put it on vegetables, salads. Sometimes I'll throw it in smoothies or just drink a shot of it or whatever as well. I do like it. However, it's not enough though. It's great, and that's awesome that it helped with your acid reflux, But in order to reach that sufficient state that we're talking about, you still need a little bit more because it only has two or three of the 7 strands that we really need in our diet. So.
Right. Anybody else got any questions?
I have a question. This is Nettie. I know you did, how do you buy the probiotics? I know I saw you had some capsules listed there. How much should you take?
Right. That's a great question. So you want to take about 30 billion CFUs a day. CFU is just the unit that they use to measure them. Doesn't really matter. But 30 billion is what you want to shoot for. Now, that's based off of our ancestors and how we evolved and how much bacteria we took in a day, which is about 1 million times more than the average American takes in now. That's how deficient we are in them. So you want to take at least 30 billion. But the important thing is you want to make sure that they're live cells. So if it's a probiotic that you don't have to keep in a refrigerator or freezer, then those cells get exposed to moisture and moisture kills them off, usually before you can take them. So you want to make sure they can last about 2 weeks and they start to die pretty quick after 2 weeks outside of a fridge. But you want to make sure that they're kept in a fridge. That's a big thing so that they're live. And you also want to make sure that you have at least 7 strands of bacteria. And it's important to look at which 7 strands, but as long as Lactobacillus plantarum is the top one, and it'll just say L plantarum, Plantarum. As long as that is the highest concentration in there, then that's a good thing. There's more that goes into it. You need to make sure that it's grown in the right medium because a lot of times they'll take a synthetic one, put it into yeast, let it multiply, and then the FDA allows them to call that natural. But it's still not a natural. It didn't come from a plant source, a fruit source. It's synthetically created. If you can, try to make sure it's grown, usually in an algae medium is where you'll find most of the bacteria grown that they captivate. Make sure it doesn't come from corn. That's really tough. There's so many things when you look at supplements because they aren't regulated that if you're not studying it constantly, then you really need to know someone who is, someone that you trust and can find the right supplements for you because they can put anything they want in them and the FDA has no regulation over supplements at all right now. So hopefully that helps.
That means it's capsules, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So like with ours, we take 2 capsules a day, one with breakfast or lunch and one with dinner. And then each one has about 15 billion CFUs in it. So we get our 30 billion in throughout the day that way. Yeah.
With food, preferably fruits, vegetables, raw, because that's going to be your prebiotic.
Right.
It's going to help your bacteria grow and culture even faster in your intestines, help them live, get into the gut.
Bacteria.
I guess my bottle that's been sitting there for 2 years isn't any good anymore, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But that's a good point, Dr. Travis. Make sure you take some fiber with your probiotic. I always tell my patients, fresh fiber first, eat a carrot with it or grab some broccoli or have a small salad before you start eating the rest of your meal. Whatever it is, give some food to that probiotic so that it has a better chance of surviving and attaching to the gut wall and everything else.
All right, and then Miranda, Miranda's question, I don't know if everyone saw this one, but what's your opinion on probiotics that actually cause the gas and the bloating, which we answered a little bit of that, but I want to make sure that we hit that one.
That typically is because they're from a synthetic or a dairy source and they're the bacteria not attaching to the gut wall, which is new in the probiotic world. We didn't understand this until maybe 2015, I would say, that it has to have the positive effect, it has to attach to the gut wall or else you will get the bloating and gas and stuff like that. There's other times that can happen and then it's just looking at the food you're eating with it. But once you figure out what you're eating with it and you're on the right probiotic, I personally in practice have not seen that happen to any of my patients. I see that kind of stuff go away more often than not. So would you agree with that, Doc?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely on that one. All right, does anybody else have any extra questions there? You're welcome. All right, well, if anybody doesn't have any other questions, like we always end, we're always here to help as many people as possible. And we always do a donation, like we're still going to Big Brothers Big Sisters. We're also doing our school drive right now. So if any of you guys are local, come by, drop off some materials, even though they may or may not be in school, but we still got to send them out to the houses. So it's just a $39 donation, covers exam, consultation, x-rays, and the SHA, which is our functional test that we do to see how everything is moving together. And then you have our office in Lakewood and also in McKinney there. And so I'll type in our phone numbers and emails again. And for you guys that are out of town and don't have access to the Omegas, A&D, Probiotics, shoot us over email and we can actually just drop ship you those orders if y'all want to. And so that's all I got for today. Anybody else got anything else before we get out of here?
Yeah, real quick. I just put my email in the comments. So if you think anything later, or other questions or questions on anything that comes up, I'm here to help if you need anything. So just shoot me an email and we'll try to get an answer for you.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. And then next week we are talking about, let's see, exercise and diet and the prevention of our chronic diseases. So that's a fun one as well.
Absolutely.
So y'all stay
Thank
cool
you.
out there and we'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.